Hi everyone, I'm Leon from a company called Autu, and I'm going to talk today about troubleshooting IT systems. So, first of all, what is troubleshooting? Well, if a system was working, then it stopped working, then it's simply find the cause of the fault and fix it. Simple as that. So, this is a different type of troubleshooting that you're probably all familiar with. The thing that I find interesting here is that a GP goes through around 6 or so years of training. Quite a lot of that covers diagnosing, which is a kind of troubleshooting. But when it comes to IT, we tend not to do any troubleshooting training. We just dive in and have a go, and you usually get on okay. But I wondered why we don't go in for troubleshooting training very much. And so could it be that it's just not important, that troubleshooting isn't that important in IT, so we don't bother? Well, according to this study by CA Technologies, IT downtime costs around $26 billion a year in North America and Europe. So doesn't look like that's the reason. Maybe there's no career benefit or no perceived career benefit in doing troubleshooting training and increasing your troubleshooting skills. So I did a quick survey in the last few days, and looks like most people think there is a benefit for IT career progression. So it doesn't look like that. Or maybe we think it just can't be learned, so it's not worth bothering with training. You just have it or you don't, or you just pick it up and you don't really learn it from training. Well, again, I asked this in the survey, and it's a bit mixed here. Most people think it can be learned to some extent. It doesn't explain everything. So, in my case, what's my experience? Because I didn't do any troubleshooting training when I got into IT, and for me it just wasn't on my radar at all. I didn't think about it. I didn't know that in a way there was such a thing as troubleshooting and that you could train for it. And so it was an unknown for me. I didn't know about it. So maybe it's an unknown for other people, and they don't really think about it. So my view on this is that troubleshooting can be learned. I've learned it myself and over time, and seen other people learn it from training. And it's easy to understand the processes or process and techniques involved, and learning and using them can make a big difference. So that's why I'm doing this talk today, to go over some of that. So what we'll cover today: a quick look at troubleshooting success formula. Then we're going to have a look at a 5-step troubleshooting process, and then we're going to go through our 10 techniques. And if you master all of those, then you'll definitely become a better kick-ass troubleshooter than you already are. And there's a picture. I couldn't get one of a kick-ass troubleshooter, so I've got a ninja instead. The troubleshooting formula for success, this is my view, it's process plus techniques plus practice makes you into a kick-ass troubleshooter. And I'm going to go over process plus techniques today. Practice is down to you. Let's have a look at a 5-step troubleshooting process. This is one I use, and I like it because it's easy to understand. There are various out there, even 10-step processes, 7-step. So step 1, is there really a problem? Because there might not be a problem. It might be the user's misunderstood how it's supposed to work. They think it's not working, but it is. Or maybe the system is down, but it's planned downtime, planned maintenance, and it's not really a problem. Or you're alerting or monitoring, saying there's a problem, that the system's down or so on, but your monitoring's not working right. So once you've established there is a problem, now you've got to find out the cause of that problem. And this is the bulk of effort usually. It's the kind of the hardest part of it. And on average might take up to 80% or so of time and effort of the whole troubleshooting process. So that's what I'm going to focus on mainly today, to show you a number of techniques to speed up that process and reduce the amount of effort taken. Once you've found the cause of the problem, fix it. That's generally a reasonably clear pathway once you know the cause. Then after you've fixed it, verify that it's really fixed. Not only that, but that it's fully fixed, because you might have just fixed it, part of it, or in some particular circumstance. Even more important is make sure it hasn't broken something else. It's really common, and by applying a fix, inevitably you're applying a change to a system to fix it, and it's changes to systems that break things too. So that's important to make sure that's checked. And finally, prevent future problems. It's one of the most important steps, but most often not done. Reason being usually because although it's important, it's not urgent, and therefore we leave it till another day, and then we never get around to doing it. So it's important to make sure you build into your system a way to make sure those do actually happen, those actions happen, because you don't want to spend your time fixing problems that didn't have to happen in the first place. So we're going to look at 10 techniques now, hidden at the moment. They'll be revealed over the next 15 minutes. First one, see, talk, ask. This is all about understanding the problem, and the more effort you spend at this point to do this well and understand it as well as you can, the better everything else will go throughout the whole troubleshooting process. So see it happening, directly see it, do a screen share, or whatever you can do to directly see the problem. Don't just rely on an email description. It makes a huge difference to see it. And same, talk to the user. Again, don't just rely on email. Pick up the phone, talk with, or go and see them and talk with them. Ask questions. Make sure you write it all down, because you'll need it all for the rest of your process. Ask the obvious things like, when did it start? Who's being impacted? Has anything changed? And anything else relevant. And while you're doing this, you can check out if it's a real problem, which is your step one of your troubleshooting process, and also the impact and urgency, so that you can prioritize what you're going to do with this problem. And finally, make sure you set expectations for the users or people involved. Particularly, best not to promise anything that you can't deliver, like fixes when you don't know how long it's going to take. But do make sure you set expectations of when you'll give an update. So next is try quick fixes and tests. So these are the things that are easy to try and most likely to either result in a fix or in finding out what the cause is. So these are the obvious things, like is it plugged in and turned on level of thing. But if you don't check this at the start, you might find out way down the line it was something really obvious. And you've got all your usual suspects to try, like turn it off and on again, restart the software, log it out and in again. Antivirus is a popular one, or ad blocking software in web browsers. These are just obvious things. And Google the error message if you got one. And if you got any hunches in there quick, then try them. But don't spend too long on this whole try quick fixes and test step. It's just the things that are really easy that are most likely to to get you somewhere before you get onto kind of more in-depth analysis and so on. So next, could be time to think about putting a workaround in place. If it's not obvious what the cause is already and it's not fixed, then depending on the impact and how long it might take, you may want to put a workaround in place. Obviously that will minimize impact while you're then investigating further. It's going to buy time for you, and it's going to reduce stress both for you and the users, and that means you can relax and focus on finding out what the problem is and putting a fix in place. This is a question that you need to keep asking. It's the most important question, really. What changed? If a system was working and it stopped working, then something definitely changed. There's no doubt about that. It's just a matter of what it is that changed, and if you find out what's changed, you're 90% there to finding out what the cause of the problem is. If you find out when it stopped working, that can help you narrow down what changed, because you can look at what changed just before or around that time it stopped working. Look at your change logs. And if you don't keep change logs, then it's worth putting the change logs in place because it can save a lot of time. And bear in mind that what changed could be data that's changed, not software or hardware or networks. It could be some data changes triggered a problem that wouldn't manifest with different data. So now we're going to look at a process of elimination. And how to use that for troubleshooting. So a process of elimination, I'm sure you're all familiar with it, and with IT systems you can think of an IT system made up of a number of components, like these ones here, and if one component isn't working properly, then the whole system could not work properly, potentially. So in troubleshooting, you don't know which bit's broken. You've got to find out, what the cause of the problem is, and you go through and eliminate things as you test them. This is a method that Sherlock Holmes used, and it's a famous quote from him: "When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth." And this process of elimination worked really well for Sherlock Holmes, but in the real world it doesn't always work so well. There are two big problems with the kind of typical process of elimination. First problem is if you're going through listing out your possible causes or your components and checking them one by one, it can take a really long time, because you might, in a complex IT system, you might have hundreds of these things, hundreds of possibilities, or at least a large number, and it's just not practical to list them all out and go through and sort of test them one by one. The other big problem is that when you list them all out, you might not think of all of them, and then you go through and test them, check them off, and you still haven't found the problem. And it's really hard to make sure you think of everything, of all possible causes. So that can cause the process to fail. So what can you do about that? Well, there's a variation of the process of elimination, which I call the binary split. This is your secret weapon. It works every time. It's really powerful, and you always get to the cause of the problem, or at least the small area where the cause is. To use this, you have to think of your system as a whole, which therefore contains all the parts, and then you split that into two areas, two logical areas, where you can easily check or eliminate one of those areas. So, for example, if this was a simple example with someone trying to log into Salesforce and they can't log in, then you could say one half of that is the user and everything related to that user. So it's the user's accounts and the user settings, the user's browser, PC, internet connection, everything user side. And on the other is the central Salesforce system. They're logging in, servers, network, everything central. And then you could check that by getting someone else to log in with a different user account from a different location and so on. So all the user end's different. If that works, then you've eliminated the other side of it, the central side. So once you've eliminated one half of it, you repeat the process, split it again, and keep doing that. And it really doesn't take long before you get right down to a small area. It's usually only 2 or 3 iterations, but sometimes maybe 4 or 5 in extreme cases. But it's completely reliable because you end up getting down to a small area quite quickly. Next technique is keeping a record. It seems obvious, but it's really important. And if you don't do it, you'll end up kind of missing things and going around in circles, and possibly even never getting to the bottom of it because of never quite catching what you need. So the type of thing to record is what tests and checks you did and what the outcomes were, what changes you made and when, and what questions were asked and the results. Also any other information you catch along the way. If there's more than one of you working on this problem, then make sure it's somewhere central where you can all edit and share the same information, so you don't kind of you don't repeat things, and you can all benefit from findings. And I like OneNote for this because it's open format. You can just throw anything in it, screenshots, lists, and so on. And you can have multiple people editing it. Next thing is to repeat the problem. You probably know the importance of this, but just to state why it's so important is without being able to repeat the problem, sometimes it's really hard to do the kind of tests you want to do to eliminate things. And particularly once you have a fix or a potential fix, if you can't repeat the problem, you've got to have a non-working system to apply your fix to then see that it's really worked. So it's vital for testing. What's also really helpful is repeating the non-problem. So for example, if you got a system that gives an error for one user, but you find another that doesn't get that problem, then you can compare what's in common with the two, because everything that's the same you can eliminate straight away and narrows it right down to what's different then. Watch out for false negatives. So what I mean by false negatives are, if you're going through a process of elimination or doing a test and actually here, but we've eliminated something where the problem actually lies. So you've got a false test result that this area wasn't the cause, didn't contain the problem, and actually it does. That can be a big problem because you end up eliminating an area and looking everywhere else, looking in the wrong places, and you can then end up looking everywhere, and you've eliminated everything, and you don't find where the problem is. If you think that's happening, that you've eliminated everything, then the best thing to do is just go back to the start of your binary split. Start at the top again with the whole system. You could split it a different way potentially, or you could just use a slightly different test, make sure it's robust, and then go through it again. Number 9 is believe there's a simple answer, and this is about the psychology of troubleshooting. It's one of the things that often gets in the way, that we start doubting what's going on. We maybe think something strange is going on. It just doesn't make sense, something really weird, or that it's really complicated and we'd never work out what it is. If you find that happening, to you, then just stop and remind yourself. Computers don't do strange things. There'll definitely be a simple answer. It's just a matter of finding it. And actually, if you look back, you'll always see that there was a simple answer, however mysterious it looked at the time. And finally, take a break. If you find you're really getting stuck, hitting your head against a brick wall, or just not making progress, then take a break, relax, change of scenery, go for a walk, and just forget about the whole thing. And when you're feeling completely refreshed, come back, have another look, and you'll be surprised at how often suddenly the way forward becomes clear. So that's now covered all the 10 techniques. As I said, if you master these, it will definitely make a difference to not only master them, make sure you actually use them is probably one of the key messages as well, because probably you know many of these or most of them already. But make sure you do use them, it will make a big difference. And a few other considerations. Intermittent issues can be a real nightmare because you can't do your checks, you can't gather information, you can't easily rule things out, you can't test fixes. So if you're getting intermittent issues, what you've got to do is put automated logging in place to capture the necessary information when it happens again. So in Salesforce, you could start your debug logs running, for example, and catch it. Wait for it to happen, see what you've caught. If that doesn't reveal what the problem is, you've got to add some extra logging to catch more information. Practice, just a reminder on that, I've now shown you process and technique, so it's now down to you to practice and make sure you use them, because it's using them that makes it work. Just a reminder on prevention, I mentioned before, but make sure you put something in place to make sure you do actually take those actions, preventative actions. It's worth it to save your time for future problems. So in conclusion, troubleshooting can be learned, that's my view, and hopefully you've seen that. Here's a process again, five-step process, 10 techniques, and plus practice is the formula to becoming an even better kick-ass troubleshooter than you are already. I'm sure you are already kick-ass troubleshooters, but this hopefully will help. And I've set up a special email address that you can email me with any feedback or sort of thoughts on troubleshooting. I'm interested to kind of learn more about this. This is the first talk I've done, but I'm planning to put together more training materials, so it'd be great to get your feedback. What works for you, what doesn't, especially if you try those 10 techniques and that 5-step process, but also anything else you use that you find useful and any other challenges that, so it'd be great to hear from you. Any questions? Yeah.
So your final sort of 10 points list.
Yes.
You said about sort of, take a break, walk away, give yourself a break to sort of, give you a sort of refreshed insight of it.
Yes.
How do you manage that in an environment where there's high pressure to fix it because things aren't working, you've got managers chasing you? How do you kind of find that space to breathe?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. One is that's why putting a workaround in place is so important, actually. And I would even argue that maybe that should be a step instead of 5-step process. Maybe you should think of it as a 6-step, because if you can put a workaround in place, do it, because it not only buys that time, but it makes it easier to think actually without having that pressure. But the other thing is, sometimes it's not an easy choice. When there's a lot of pressure and it gets to the point you're not thinking clearly and going around in circles, well, you could just keep trying, but there's a balance between, well, do you take a break and kind of clear your mind and come back to it, or just keep trying? And I find that sometimes it really does help to just leave it for a while, take a break and clear your mind. But definitely, the best thing to do is put a workaround in place or something in place to buy that time to give, to do that. Yes.
Your very first thing was, is it a real problem? I think if the problem is that the system's down for routine maintenance, there is a problem, but it's the user hasn't been communicating.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Or if it works as it's designed, but they didn't know that, and the problems with the training.
Yeah, that's true. No, I agree completely. Yeah, actually, I mean, in terms of the underlying problem, that you could say there's not one. But yeah, if you're thinking of kind of support requests coming in, then usually they're all preventable in some way. So that's right. You can prevent that same request coming in again, and that comes under number 5, prevention. I'd say, yeah. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. If anyone wants